Thank you for taking time today to participate in our HUD NOFA competition, or at least learning a bit more about it. If you have any questions or difficulties in accessing the functionality of this webinar, please do a chat on I believe it would be on your right-hand side, and I will do my best to get back to you. If you aren't able to hear or see something, just know that the webinar is being recorded and we can get it to you at a later time. So for now, I just wanted to talk a little bit about housekeeping for this webinar. As I mentioned, it is being recorded. Right now, everyone is on mute, except obviously for myself. And we will have several opportunities throughout the webinar to take a break and have open dialogue and answer some questions to the best of our ability. So with that, I wanted to start off with some, whoops, trying to get to the next page here. Let's see how that works. Hold on just a moment. Okay, sorry about that. I think that it's really important as we go through this webinar that you all have some resources in front of you, or that you have taken the time to become familiar with a few things about the HUD 2018 competition. So if you haven't already, please plan on visiting the HUD Exchange website. If you just Google HUD Exchange, it should be fairly simple to get to that. You can then search within that, or even in Google, for the HUD 2018 CoC program NOFA. There will be lots of other materials for the competition. And when I say lots, I mean lots. Make sure that you read the things that are pertinent to your application or the project design that you're entering into. Equally as important is the CoC interim rule. That is the governing regulations that all programs and agencies must abide by. So when you see tiny little references within the NOFA, it's usually directing you back to the CoC interim rule. And that is what you're bound by when you are operating your program, when you're applying for something. So make sure you're familiar with that. You can also find that on the HUD Exchange website. Additionally, they have an opportunity on HUD Exchange to submit questions. That's under the Ask a Question portal. I also find the frequently asked questions to be really helpful. So when I'm writing an application or I have a question, I'll go to the FAQs and I'll just maybe type in a quick concept and pull up and see what questions that HUD has already answered that are related to that. HUD does take time to answer questions. So if you have a question and you've submitted it to myself or through some of your colleagues and you don't have an answer, then we would ask that you submit it through the AAQ. The other thing that you may find helpful is the Alliance's website, and that can be found at kthomelessalliance.org. And within that, you will find a tab called Projects, and you will find the HUD CoC competition. And we'll have the project selection and ranking process posted on there, as well as a few other things that you may need to submit with your application. So feel free to go there and look for those things. And if you have trouble locating any of those, just let us know. And I just realized that I didn't introduce myself. I saw that a lot of folks online I'm already familiar with, but I did notice that there's a few new folks. So for those of you who are new, welcome. And my name is Michelle Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Homeless Alliance, and we are the lead applicant for this application process and for the competition. So thanks for joining in. Okay, so for our competition overview, just to give you some context as to how the process works, the COC program is designed to promote a community-wide commitment to the goal of ending homelessness, to provide funding for efforts by nonprofit providers, states, and local governments to quickly rehouse homeless individuals, families, persons fleeing from domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, and youth while minimizing the trauma and dislocation caused by homelessness, to promote access to and effective utilization of mainstream programs by homeless individuals and families, and to optimize self-sufficiency among those experiencing homelessness. Yes, that was just one sentence. This webinar is intended to provide an overview of the COC requirements and this funding opportunity, as well as to ensure a comprehensive understanding and compliance with all COC requirements. All applicants should read and be familiar, as I mentioned, with the federal fiscal year 2018 COC NOFA, the COC program interim rule, and the other things we just talked about. The application consists of 3 parts. Those are the COC application. We often refer to that as the collaborative application or the consolidated application. Then there is a COC project listing, and then project applications. Today we're really going to be focusing on project applications. Folks who are interested in getting a project funded, that's the piece that you're going to be pursuing. The COC application is the larger piece. It's everything that the COC is doing, and the project applications get rolled up into that. And then the project listing basically prioritizes project applications. So item or parts number 1 and 2 are things that the Alliance will be taking care of in partnership with all of you. And then the project applications are what you're going to be working on. So all in all, we are eligible to apply for just over $2.6 million for funding for homeless housing and services within our bi-county region. Funding is not available for emergency shelter activities, homeless prevention projects, new transitional housing, unless it is a joint rapid rehousing and transitional housing project, and or for new supportive service only projects unless they are coordinated entry. So within our funding available, the $2.6 million that I just mentioned, we have $2.25 million that is available, what we call annual renewal demand funding. That funding supports the COC's existing housing and services. The COC has the option to continue to support those programs or to reallocate those resources in whole or in part to other new permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, joint transitional housing, rapid rehousing, HMIS, or coordinated entry SSO only projects. The next category we have is bonus funding, and for this year we are eligible to apply for $135,446. This funding supports permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, joint transitional housing, rapid rehousing, HMIS, or coordinated entry supportive service only projects. New in 2018, we have the opportunity for agencies in our community to apply for domestic violence bonus funding, just over or just under $205,000. This funding supports the rapid rehousing, joint transitional housing, rapid rehousing standalone, or supportive service only projects for coordinated entry. And then finally, COC planning funds in just under $68,000. Those go to the Alliance for coordinating all required HUD activities throughout the year. Now, this funding gets separated into 2 categories, if you will. So what we would do with projects is we rank them into Tier 1 and Tier 2. And you can see on the screen what those figures are. So I know the burning question for you all is, what are tiers? So here we go. In 2018, our available funding for Tier 1 is equal to 94% of our ARD, or annual renewal demand. So if we hop back to the previous screen, that ARD is $2.25 million. So 94% of that is going to go into Tier 1. Tier 2 is Tier 2 is the amount of funding, which is the difference between Tier 1's 94% and that ARD of 100% plus bonus amount. And we're not talking about the DV bonus amount. So hope you've all had plenty of caffeine to keep up with me here. But basically what we would be looking at is your ARD of 2.5 million plus the bonus monies equals to your Tier 1 if we're the 94% of ARD goes into Tier 1. The 6% of your ARD plus this bonus amount is equal to your Tier 2. So that's $270,000. And now I've stuck myself here. That was not very smart. Let's get back here. Okay, note to self, do not use the highlighter. Okay, sorry about that. So in Tier 2, what happens is funding is determined by the point value of each project application based on a 100-point scale. All Tier 2 projects will be funded in point order. And so what that looks like is 100 points of Tier 2 or of your application is based on the CoC score. So what does the CoC in general score within the competition? So 50 of the 100 points are in direct proportion to that. And then the CoC ranking. So how the CoC's rating and ranking committee scores your project. So 40 of your points would be how your score in the competition lands. So those points are spread evenly across the Tier 2 funding amount. Higher ranked projects get more points. However, the formula used to award points gives a disincentive for large projects. And then finally, up to 10 of the 100 points are for the Housing First commitment. So for permanent housing applications in Tier 2, they will receive points based on how the project commits to applying for the Housing First model. HMIS and supportive service only for coordinated entry will receive 10 points, and then transitional housing, joint TH and RRH projects, Safe Haven and other supportive service only projects will receive points based on how the project demonstrates that it is low barrier, prioritizes rapid placement and stabilization in permanent housing, and does not have service participation requirements or preconditions to entry, such as sobriety or a minimum income threshold. And then we may have projects once we're doing the tier that straddle tiers just from a numbers perspective because perhaps that project is a little bit more than the 94% that would have fit into Tier 1. So that project would be straddling Tier 1 and Tier 2. So for any projects that straddle the two tiers, the Tier 1 portion will be funded in accordance with the Tier 1 process, and the Tier 2 portion will be funded in accordance with the Tier 2 process. HUD may award projects for just the Tier 1 portion, provided the project is still feasible with the reduced funding. So for example, is it able to continue serving homeless program participants effectively? So if we were going to kind of take that and apply it to real world, let's say that we only had $10,000 left in Tier 1 on a $200,000 project. So $10,000 went into Tier 1 and $190,000 was in Tier 2. And our CoC did not score high enough to get any Tier 2 projects funded. That Tier 1 piece of $10,000 would be lost because it would not be feasible for a project to operate with $10,000 per year. Okay, so in 2018, there, in my opinion, are a lot of different things going on, or highlights that I'd like to share with you. So as we've already chatted about a little bit, there is a DV bonus opportunity. That's that 205,000 that we talked about. So in addition to just the regular bonus funding available, we have that 205,000. That domestic violence bonus is designed to serve survivors of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. Then there's some changes to the bonus grant opportunities this year. So reallocation monies and bonus funding may be commingled, and bonus funding may be used to fund HMIS or supportive service only for coordinated entry projects, not just housing projects. That's the first time we've seen that as a bonus opportunity. So it really tells us that HUD is putting a lot of emphasis on the fact that both HMIS and coordinated entry are extremely important pieces of an overall homeless response system. The other thing new this year are transition grants, and this is pretty exciting. A transition grant means that an applicant may transition their project from one COC program component to another over a one-year cycle. And so let's say that you had a HUD-funded rapid rehousing project, and you wanted to switch it to a permanent supportive housing project. So maybe from rental assistance to leasing or something like that. That's what a transition grant would do. So in the past, what we've done as a community is we have basically reallocated those funding. So an agency would say, okay, I'm not going to apply for that project this year, and I'm going to apply for a new project instead. Well, the problem with that is that one project closes, and then there is a significant lag time between starting up the new project. So we could have a very negative impact in our community of up to 1 year of losing beds because we are moving to a higher performing project type. And so HUD recognizes that, and they are allowing people to transition from one project type to another. So I think that's pretty exciting. The other thing that I know folks are excited about is consolidated grants. So this is where an applicant may consolidate 2, 3, or 4 eligible renewal projects into one project during the application process. Now this would eliminate any need during a program year to request a grant consolidation, or basically you're amending grants. And I know that there are folks that have been trying to do that for quite some time, and it just hasn't happened because of some technical issues on HUD's side. So this is a way for that to happen. And then expansion grants. This is something that we were eligible to do last year. And basically it's that an applicant can apply for new funding to expand COC program funded or non-COC program funded projects. And then just to let you all know, the fiscal year 2018 FMRs will apply for this year. So because the COC consolidated application is due prior to the publication of the final fiscal year 2019 FMRs, the 2018 FMRs will be used for funding amounts. So now let's talk about HUD homeless policy and priorities. So if you are thinking about starting up a new project, whether you're new to the whole competition process, or you are a seasoned pro at it and want to design a new project, we wanted to share with you what HUD's priorities are, because that's how they're going to fund projects, new projects, and that's how they expect COCs to score projects. So all projects, whether they're renewal or new, should align with HUD's policy and program priorities, both to increase their likelihood of being funded in this cycle and to ensure that the funding is a good match for the project in the future. Both COCs and project applications will be evaluated based on the extent to which they further HUD's policy priorities. So the first one, ending homelessness for all persons, they have expectations that both COCs and projects should identify, engage, and effectively serve all persons experiencing homelessness. That we should be measuring project performance based on local data, taking into account challenges faced by all subpopulations. We should have a comprehensive outreach strategy to identify and continuously engage all unsheltered individuals and families, and that the COC should use the reallocation process to create new projects that improve overall community performance and a better response to homeless needs. When thinking about creating a systemic response to homelessness, we should be using system performance measures, and that we should be using the coordinated entry process to promote participant choice and to coordinate homeless assistance and mainstream housing and services. And then strategically allocating and using resources. This is a big one this year. HUD is scoring COCs based on how well they are looking at project performance and making those tough decisions to reallocate funding to higher performing projects. So they're expecting COCs to use cost, performance, and outcome data to improve how resources are utilized to end homelessness within our region. So during the process of rating and ranking, they expect us to review project quality, performance, and cost effectiveness. They also expect that our community maximize the use of mainstream and other community-based resources when serving people experiencing homelessness. So this is kind of an important thing when you're looking at program design, to not just look within your agency. So let's say you've got a ton of monies coming in, perhaps you're getting a lot of cash donations or whatnot. HUD really wants to see, how are you allocating other resources in the community? What's already out there, and how are you partnering with those agencies? So kind of tagging on to that, one new thing they have this year is expecting that we as a community work to develop partnerships with public housing authorities to work toward helping COC program participants exit permanent supportive housing through housing choice vouchers and other available housing options. So that's been a push for a while, but they're really strengthening their focus on that, because there's really no other way to get someone out of a permanent supportive housing unit unless we have strong what would be called move-up strategies. So that's a way to open up beds for other people who have high needs. And then finally, under that item 3, they expect that we review all projects eligible for renewal to determine their effectiveness in serving people experiencing homelessness, as well as their cost effectiveness. And then finally, using a housing first approach. And I think we all know what that is, but it's really removing barriers to entry and adopting client-centered service methods. So right now I'm going to just take a quick break, and I'd like to hear from you all. I've turned off the mute button, so this is an opportunity to chat about any questions of the items that we've already talked about. We're going to go more in depth on the project applications and stuff in our next segment, but it gives me an opportunity to have a sip of tea and hear what you all think. Any questions out there? Okay, well, I haven't received any through the chat functionality either, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the next section. And we're going to talk about new funding or new project funding options. Okay, so if you are looking to apply for a new project in the 2018 NOFA, there are 3 ways you can do it. One would be reallocation of existing funding from renewal projects. So basically, it would be that your new project scores higher than other projects that are existing, perhaps because a project isn't performing well, so it scores pretty low. So you could go in with a new project hoping that you would score higher than an existing project. You could go in for bonus funding, or finally for the domestic violence bonus funding. And then new this year is that projects can also apply for a combination of reallocation and bonus funding. So let's say the bonus funding, gosh, I already forgot what that amount was. I think it was about 140,000. It was our bonus is 135,000. So let's say that wasn't enough for you to operate a project. You could write for 200,000 in hopes that the Rating and Ranking Committee sees the value of your project and funding would be reduced or eliminated from a lower performing project. The requirements, eligibility, amounts, and processes differ among the types of funding, so potential applicants should consider both carefully. However, all new permanent housing projects will be evaluated using the same criteria. Okay, so let's dig in a little deeper on that reallocation or bonus opportunity. So that option A, applicants may apply for the reallocated funds, as I mentioned, from renewal projects or bonus funding or a combination of both. And so those would be for new permanent supportive housing projects where 100% of the beds are dedicated to either chronically homeless or to dedicated plus populations. Now, I'm not going to be covering the definition of dedicated plus, especially because it has changed from 2017 to 2018. So look at the NOFA on that. Last year, we did not have any dedicated plus projects. So you would only need to look at the 2018 definition. An agency could also apply for new rapid rehousing project. You could apply for the joint transitional housing and rapid rehousing project. And just for the sake of how many words that is and time, I'm going to start calling it a joint RRH project. And that means that it includes transitional housing and permanent housing, rapid rehousing in a single project to serve people who are experiencing homelessness, including victims of domestic violence. You could apply for new dedicated HMIS project. Now, keeping in mind that could only be carried out by the HMIS lead in our community, that is Kings United Way. And then it could be finally a new supportive services only project to develop or operate a centralized or coordinated entry system. And that will also be through the Kings Tulare Homeless Alliance, which operates coordinated entry. However, they don't explicitly say that it could only be by the coordinated entry lead. So if somebody has thoughts on how coordinated entry could be expanded, I think we would certainly be interested in talking about that to see where we can best leverage the strengths and opportunities within our community. Now, there's no guarantee that reallocated funding will be available, but it may be if one or more renewal projects decides not to apply or is not selected by the panel. COCs may only reallocate eligible renewal projects that have been previously renewed under the COC program. So for example, if we had a new project that is starting this year, it was funded for 2017, and this will be the first renewal, that project cannot be reallocated. So it'd only be a project that has been renewed at least one time. Okay, option B, domestic violence bonus. So we can have up to 3 domestic violence bonus projects. And again, that DV bonus funding is just under 205,000. And those can be one of either of these project types: rapid rehousing, joint RRH, and then supportive service only project for coordinated entry. And then that would be for that supportive services only is to implement policies, procedures, and practices that equip the COC's coordinated entry to better meet the needs of survivors of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. So it would be like, examples would be to implement policies and procedures that are trauma-informed, client-centered, or to better coordinate referrals between the COC's coordinated entry and the victim services provider's coordinated entry system where they are different. And then a COC may apply to expand an existing renewal project that is not dedicated to serving survivors of domestic violence, dating, violence, sexual assault, or stalking, to dedicate additional units, beds, persons served, or services provided to an existing program participants to this population. So basically, they're allowing you to do an expansion of an existing project. Oh, goodness, I think I just messed up my screen. Okay, so you could do an expansion project, basically adding the DV bonus monies to it. And then option C for those new projects is just a flat out expansion. So as I mentioned earlier, you could expand an existing COC program funded project. And so it would be a new project that you submit, but you select the expansion piece. And when it comes time to contract, they would put those together as one project. And then there's some technicalities with how you would apply for that within eSNAPs. And I can go over that with folks specifically if they will be doing that. But there's also a ton of information through the HUD Exchange website within their guidebooks. It's important to keep in mind that under this type of expansion, in order for the new expansion project to be selected for conditional award, the renewal project application must also be selected for a conditional award. So basically, if you're thinking about rating and ranking, there would never be an instance where an expansion project would score higher than the primary project because of this rule that you can't expand something that didn't get funded. So that's how the Rating and Ranking Committee will handle that. Some things to keep in mind is that if you are doing an expansion, you have to indicate how that new project application will expand units, beds, services, persons served, or services provided to existing program participants. Or in the case of HMIS or coordinated entry projects, how the current activities will be expanded for the COC's geographical area, and to ensure the funding request for the expansion grant is within the funding parameters allowed under the reallocation or bonus funding amounts available. So in this context, you want to think about what's allowable under bonus, what's allowable under DV bonus, because there are some restrictions on that. And then this is new language, at least to me, expanding a non-COC program funded project. So if you have a project that's not funded by COC program funds, you can expand it now to add to that project. In the past, we've always sort of left that concept out and we've always just called them new projects. But now with this concept of expansion projects, we can actually talk about it being an expansion, not a new project. So in thinking about what are eligible project types, there are 5 within the competition. There is what we call PSH, Permanent Supportive Housing for Chronic Homeless, or Dedicated Plus. We've kind of talked about that already. So that can be funded through bonus or reallocation. Rapid rehousing can be funded through bonus, reallocation, or DV bonus. So take note here that a DV bonus cannot fund permanent supportive housing. Number 3, joint THRRH can be funded the same way as just regular rapid rehousing. So bonus, reallocation, or DV bonus. Dedicated HMIS could be bonus or reallocation. That has never happened before. Bonus has always been for sticks and bricks for actual housing. And then SSO for coordinated entry could be bonus, reallocation, or DV bonus. So there's some really exciting opportunities there. I will mention that Dedicated Plus, although I'm not going to go through the definition of that, it has been slightly redefined since 2017. So make sure that you're looking at the 2018 NOFA, or if you're reading anything on the HUD Exchange website, that it has been the most up-to-date information. Let's see, I can go through project types, but I think I'll go ahead and skip through that because I think you all can read through that in the NOFA. All of those definitions are there. So I'm going to go ahead and skip through that. So right now we've got an opportunity for questions. I'm going to pop it over to the mic so you all can talk. And we did get a question via the chat box. And so if anyone else has questions, I'll let them go through those. And then I'll dig up an answer for the question on the chat box. So does anyone have questions about anything we've covered thus far? Okay, well, I don't know if you all can see the chat question that CSET brought up, which is regarding FMRs for 2018. Does that apply to renewals? And it just says because the COC consolidated application is due prior to the publication, the FY 2018 FMRs will be used for funding amounts. So although I can't be 100% certain, I believe that is the case. So when you're plunking in your unit numbers into unit numbers and types into the application, it's going to pre-populate and you won't have any opportunity to change those unless you are a project that uses actual rents. And I think we only have one of those projects in the community. So if I have answered incorrectly, the system will actually force it, but I don't think they will go any less. So if you're going off of 2017 right now, you'll get a bump to 2018 if FMRs have gone up in the regions that you serve. If they've gone down, your funding will go down as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You are welcome. Okay, so let's talk about threshold requirements. I know that a lot of you are familiar with this process in prior years, but for new projects, HUD looks at a couple of things. They consider an applicant and subrecipient's eligibility and capacity, project eligibility, and project quality as part of the threshold review. So what they're looking at as far as project eligibility, they look that the applicant is eligible under the CoC program. So you have to be like a unit of local government, a nonprofit. There's a few other categories. So you have to be eligible. You have to demonstrate financial and management capacity and experience to carry out the project and to administer federal funds. You have to submit required certifications. You have to propose an eligible population for the project type. You have to show that the project is cost effective, with costs not deviating substantially from the norm in your community for similar project activities. So it's important to really look at how other projects in our community are designed and kind of stay within that curve. And then you also have to agree to participate in HMIS or the comparable database. Minor changes this year are to the project quality threshold. HUD will review all new project applications to determine if they meet project quality threshold requirements. If awarded, a recipient is required to meet all the criteria listed for its component. The housing and services proposed must be appropriate to the needs of the program, participants, and the community. For renewal projects, of course, HUD assumes that it meets project eligibility because they've already funded it. However, they will kind of run a check to make sure that their prior performance met goals and plans established in the initial application and renewals, that the project applicant has demonstrated all timeliness standards for grant renewals, including expenditure rates, that the number of project participants is in alignment with what they promised to do in the application. If there has been any evidence that a project applicant applicant has been unwilling to accept technical assistance, has had a history of inadequate financial accounting, or indications of project mismanagement, then HUD can opt to not renew that project. So not only do you need to go through the local rating and ranking, but HUD is also going to be looking at just these general threshold requirements. Okay, so changes to renewal projects. So we talked a little bit about dedicated plus projects. So projects that were awarded as dedicated plus projects in the fiscal year 2017 competition are required to include households with children to qualify as dedicated plus in 2018. So since we didn't have any in 2017, that's really not an issue for us. Now, if a renewal project wants to go from chronically homeless to dedicated plus, that project, let's see, that project will be required to adhere with all fair housing requirements, of course, and would need to then switch to individuals and families. They are for projects that have actual rent selected, and again, I think we only have one of those projects in our community. That applicant must provide copies of the leases to establish the actual rents. So make sure that that happens. And then for rapid rehousing eligibility, certain rapid rehousing renewal projects may be allowed to serve participants beyond those proposed in the initial funding application. So for example, if a renewing rapid rehousing project was originally funded to serve only families with children, that project through the fiscal year 2018 application may also be able to serve individuals if it so chooses, depending on whether the original application was a bonus project. So if you have a rapid rehousing project and you're wanting to make this shift, please reach out to me and we can chat about whether or not that initial funding was a bonus project. Okay, renewal grant options. So there, as I mentioned earlier, there are 3 options for people who are renewing their grants. And these have not been available in past competitions, so it's kind of exciting. And we talked about it. You can transition it to another program component. You can consolidate several grants, or you can expand your renewal grant. The match requirements are the same as in prior years. We have 25% cash or in-kind match required. The match must be used for activities that are eligible under Subpart D of the CoC interim rule for the project. So what that means is, let's say you have a rental assistance project. Well, in rental assistance, operations are not an eligible cost. So you cannot use operation expenses as match for your rental assistance project. So it has to be eligible in that project type within your grant. So cash match or in-kind would be the value of any property, equipment, goods, or services contributed that provided if a recipient or subrecipient had to pay, they would have been eligible. And make sure that if you're doing cash match, you have to have the documentation. They are required as a part of our local competition. You do not have to upload them in eSnaps, but you have to have them when you submit to the Alliance. That documentation has to be dated between May 1st, 2018 and September 18th, 2018. So within the CoC competition piece. Now, if you're doing in-kind match, remember you have to have an MOU, memorandum of understanding between the recipient or subrecipient and the third party that's going to provide those services. So the services provided by individuals must be valued at rates consistent with those ordinarily paid for similar work in the recipient or subrecipient's organization. And the MOU must establish the unconditional commitment, except for the selection to receive a grant, by the third party to provide services, the specific service to be provided, the profession of the persons providing the service, and the hourly cost of services to be provided. In the project application, projects must list the type and source and the value of each match commitment, but as I mentioned, will not be required to attach the match letter. The match information entered into eSNAP should be based on the current commitments at the time of the project application, covering the requested grant operating period and not based on projections. The application should be accurate with a commitment letter or letters in place that includes the amount listed. So, for those of you who have renewed projects, you already know about many of these contract responsibilities, and so I'm really sharing this with people who might be newer to the HUD world and what contract responsibilities we each have when we pursue these funding opportunities. So bear with me as I share some of this information with our newer folks. So some of the things, if you are selected for funding, that you would have to adhere to are audits. So you would need to conduct a single or program-specific audit if you are expending $750,000 or more in a year in federal funding. From a reporting perspective, you have annual performance reports that you are required to submit, record keeping, and so you may have to submit reports on that. And then also a Transparency Act that you have to follow the Federal Financial Assistance, Accountability, and Transparency Act of 2006. You are also subject to impact and success indicators. And so how your project is providing a positive impact or success, and looking at systematic indicators for evaluating those successes. Other data requests, so if HUD asks for other items, you are bound to provide those. You're bound to follow the Housing First approach, match documentation that we talked about. We've also talked about HMIS participation. Your agency must perform the tasks outlined in your application. And so if you're going to veer from that, you need to have HUD approval through a grant amendment. You will need to document homeless status and disability status for clients if you are a housing project. You must participate in coordinated entry. You have to follow housing and service-related requirements, and those equal housing quality standards, and then supportive housing services for clients as needed. And all programs must provide ongoing assessment of supportive services. You have to follow fair housing, calculation of client rent. So HUD determines the amount of rent that can be charged to clients, and recipients must show documentation of rent calculations. Those are areas in which a program can get itself into trouble and may be subject to paying monies back to HUD. No program fees, so HUD does not allow for recipients or subrecipients to charge program participants program fees. Agencies must have policies. They are required to institute certain policies, including participant participation. Well, that's an interesting one. Grievance procedures, due process for participant termination, staff rules, emergency safety and evacuation procedures, confidentiality restrictions, non-discrimination, free from religious influences, conflict of interest, anti-lobbying, drug-free workplace, etc. Mainstream resources, you have to coordinate and integrate your program with other mainstream health, social service, and employment programs for which your clients may be eligible. Coordinating with educational agencies. So any program that serves homeless families has to certify that their program will establish policies and practices that are consistent with and do not restrict the exercise of rights provided by the education subtitle of the McKinney-Vento Act. And then new this year is meaningful participation. So if I had you all board with all those contract responsibilities, here's a really exciting one. So HUD is really focusing on making sure that traditionally marginalized populations, such as racial and ethnic minorities and persons with disabilities, will be able to meaningfully participate in the planning process. The applicant must identify the special population that it will include, identify community organizations that represent this population, and describe how this population will be included in the planning process. So in seeking public participation, applicants and recipients must ensure that all communications are provided in a manner that is effective for persons with hearing, visual, and other communication-related disabilities consistent with the Section 504 Act, and is applicable the Americans with Disabilities Act. In addition, Title 6 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and a few other regulations require that grantees take reasonable steps to ensure meaningful access to services, programs, and activities by persons with limited English proficiency. And the exact act and executive orders can be found in the NOFA. So I didn't mean to just run that over, but you can find that specific information within the NOFA. So I just want to take a breather, see if anybody has any questions on the information that we've talked about thus far before we get into the fun part of applying online. Any questions out there? Okay, you all must be taking a nap.
Oh, we're wide awake.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to put you on mute again. We'll go into the next section and try and get you out of this as quickly as possible. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the application portal. It's called eSnaps. And so you can access all the information for eSnaps through the HUD website. And that website is www.hud.gov/eSnaps, ESNAPS. And if you just put in eSnaps into Google, you'll be able to get there that way too. You'll also find a link to it on the HUD Exchange section for the 2018 competition. The thing that I really want to emphasize here are the technical guides. Please review the HUD training modules before accessing eSnaps or attempting to enter data. They may save you time since they offer very detailed instructions and very useful tips. So for example, if you're not able to access something, you don't see something, and you want to ask me a question, while I'm happy to reply, I need to go to that document and read the instructions. So I'll be looking at the same place that you would be going to. So within the technical guides, there are many different guides, and by many, I mean many. So there are things like how understanding eSnaps features and functions, how to add and delete registrants, how to navigate the menu, how to update your project profile, so on and so forth. So familiarize yourself with that. And what I often do, because believe it or not, in addition to the consolidated application, I too have to write 3 project applications. So I'm doing the same thing you all are doing. And so I'll have 1 new application and 2 renewals to do. So what I do is I print out how to access the new project or the renewal project. And I also print out the detailed instructions, and I have those side by side as I write my grant. So there's no special trick to any of this. It's really reading the guides. So some other things that are important are, of course, updating the project application information, and I meant to say applicant. And so your agency, you need to update some stuff there, and then you'll need to submit the application for funding, of course. Okay, so what does that all look like? When I said many guides, I meant many. This is like one of 3 pages of guides just on what you need to do. So what I'd like to show you here is this project applicant and funding recipient. You'll want to look at this, getting your applicant profile in edit mode, updating who your authorized representatives are. Those are things you're going to want to make sure that you're doing. The guidebooks are available on the HUD Exchange website. I have a link there for you to take a look at. And you can just click on that hyperlink once you have a copy of this PowerPoint. So things to keep in mind on here is under applications for housing and services project funding, be sure to refer to both guides. So not only the process for completing the application, but the detailed instructions. So if you think you have the information and you only have one packet, then you don't have all the information. You want to do both, because there are little snippets within those detailed instructions that are giving you hints on how you need to write your application or what specific information that HUD is looking for. And so for this, keep in mind, this is for renewal projects, and then there's one for new projects down here. Okay, if you're going to be consolidating, you've got here. So there's a variety of different ones that you could be using. Okay, so in eSNAPs, if you are new to applying through HUD, you need to establish a new eSNAPs account. If your agency has had changes in the people who need to access, you will need to get a new person on here. I already mentioned following the guidebooks closely. And then renewal projects that have renewed at least once may submit with no changes on select screens. So that was similar to last year, and I think it's really helpful for agencies, especially considering that if you are a renewal project, you can't change anything anyways unless you're doing a transition grant. You are stuck with what you're doing. Changes happen through an amendment process, not through the competition. So if, as I mentioned, if you're new with eSNAPs, you not only have to sign up and get an account, but once you've established your agency as an applicant, then you can initiate your project application. So it's getting eSNAPs access, creating your applicant profile, and then accessing the application. Now, keep in mind the eSNAP system is not always user-friendly or glitch-free. It is likely that you will encounter some problems along the way, but many problems can be avoided by following the instructions and closely relying upon the training modules and by using the correct browser. So if you're not able to see something or things aren't changing, saving or whatnot, change your browser. That could be the issue. And if all that doesn't work, then go get a cup of coffee and come back. eSNAPs attachments. So every applicant or agency must complete an applicant profile. So there's only going to be one of those. And then there will be a project application for each project. You should not attempt to go directly to the project application until you have done the applicant profile. If you've gotten to your application first, you're going to have to retrace your steps. So make sure you keep that in mind. Applicant profile attachments. So a code of conduct. Now this may or may not be required for your agency. If your code of conduct is already listed on HUD's website, they have a special website that you can go and check that out. If your code of conduct is on there, you do not need to add it. If your code of conduct is not on there, you need to add it. Nonprofit documentation of applicant eligibility. You may have already attached that in a previous year, and so you would not need to reattach it if it's already there. The survey on equal employment is optional, so you can upload it or not. And if you're using an indirect cost rate, you would need to upload that. And then if you're having a subrecipient, their 501c3 letter would go within the project application, not within the applicant profile. And then just a reminder that all attachments need to be dated between May 2018 and September 18th, 2018. Now that's only going to be for things that actually have a date on it. So we don't expect your 501c3 letter to have a date range in there because that's not how that works. So it would only be things that you need to sign and date. Okay, applicant profile. Before you can access the project application, you have to complete and submit that applicant profile and the related documents. So one of the tips, looks like okay. So one of the tips that I'd like to give you is that the complete button on the applicant profile must be selected within the time frame of the competition period. So therefore, when you log in the first time during this NOFA period, even if there is a statement that says this e-form has been marked as complete, you have to put it in edit mode, revise the profile, and then select complete again. Now, I recognize that that is a really inefficient activity to do, but that's just the way it works. So, and I'll show you what that looks like visually in a moment. Again, complete one applicant profile per applicant, not one per project. And let's go to the next screen. I can show you what that looks like. So when you're in eSnaps, let's see. When you're in eSnaps, you'll want to select the applicant profile, okay? And you will see if you're in a renewal, it'll say this form has been marked as complete. And that's because last year you did it. And so what you're going to want to do is click down here in the submission summary. I'm trying to get snazzy with this highlighter thing. Okay. So in the submission summary, when you click on it, it's going to say this e-form has been marked as complete, but you want to select edit. That's going to open it back up, okay? And so when you hit edit, you'll be able to go through all of these items here and update them, because if you look at organization information, additional information, HUD Form 2880, all of those things, it shows you here when they were last updated. As you can see, none of these things have been updated during the period that HUD has told us to update things. So this is my applicant profile, and it shows none of this has been updated since 2017. So once I hit the edit button, then I'm able to go back through these things and update everything. If things do not need to be changed, I just go in and maybe retype the phone number and then hit submit. Then it'll be marked as complete. You'll see the last updated date, and I'll be good to go. Then I can access the application. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about is DUNS number and the SAM number. If you are new to the government game, you need to have a DUNS number. You also need to have a SAM number. Now that is the new process that is replacing the CCR. I think most of our partners already have this information, but I do want to point out that under SAM, in 2018, they are requiring additional steps in its registration process due to fraud, including submission of notarized letters. So if your agency needs to register, please update your SAM registration as early as possible. So do go in there and check that out. I know that our agency moved during the competition process from last year, and so we had to go through some extra things within DUNS that took a few days. So make make sure that you have that all buttoned up. Your code of conduct, we've talked about. If it's not listed, it must be uploaded. If there is revised information, you must upload it. So what is revised information? That would be things like the person who is responsible for answering questions. So let's say the person who submitted the previous application is no longer your authorized organizational representative, then you need to update it. If your organization has changed their legal name or merged with another organization, you need to update it. And then finally, if your address has changed, you need to update it. Okay, if you had an old written code of conduct prior to 2017 and you haven't reapplied, most likely they have taken it off of the HUD's website. So when they went through to update them, you may or may not be listed on there. So do make sure that that is correct. And as long as it is, you're not required to submit another copy. I always pull mine down and just take a look to make sure it meets the most current requirements of HUD. So we'll take another quick break before we get into the final section. We're almost done, and just want to give you guys a chance to ask any questions. Do we have any questions out there? Okay, so finally, we're going to head into what does our local competition timeline look like? I think you all are aware of these timelines. We have posted this within our project selection and ranking tool, but there have been just a couple of changes that you may not be aware of. And so that is that during rating and ranking here on August 28th, we did not have that date posted before, but it is going to be August 28th. In the actual project selection tool, it said there will be meetings, and there will not. We just ask that you provide a contact name and number so that Rating and Ranking Committee can contact your agency with any questions on your project. So make sure it's somebody who's familiar with the projects that you have submitted. All other timelines have really stayed the same in here. Keep in mind August 14th to the 18th, we have optional pre-submittal meetings. So if you've put together an application and you have questions on things, just want to vet it, you can reach out to me directly and we can schedule something to take a look at your project. Okay. Let's see. So when you're actually submitting to the Alliance, again, we're trying to keep this as streamlined and easy for folks as possible because we know a lot is on everyone's plate. So this year, we're not asking for any hard copies. Everything is going to be electronic. So within your project application, or for your project application piece, you're going to submit a PDF of the application. So that will be as you submitted it through eSnaps. And then you're going to send a PDF file containing the most recent APR, the LOX report for the most recent operating year, and match letters, or a letter indicating when you expect to receive your match documentation. We know that the competition timeline is tight and you may not have all those letters within the next couple of weeks. So we're just asking that you put that all together and have a plan on when you expect to receive those. Okay. Do use the electronic way to get a PDF if possible. If you print everything out and rescan it in, it's very hard for us to search by keyword. So we ask that you convert files electronically. So for example, your LOX report, don't print it out and then rescan it in. If you just click print to PDF or save as PDF, that would be the best way or our preferred way to have that done. And then agency documentation, let's say you're submitting 5 applications or 2 applications. We only need your agency documentation one time, okay? Rating and ranking. So as I mentioned, it'll be Tuesday, August 28th, phone calls only. and then we need the contact information. New this year, we are going to ask you to pre-score some of the pieces of your project. There will be more information to follow on that. It will go out via the listserv, and it's going to be the actual rating and ranking tool that the committee will use. But we think it's helpful for agencies to kind of go through those steps on their own to really take ownership of where their project is from a performance perspective. I think sometimes it's eye-opening when you kind of see the information in a different light. So we're asking that that piece happen this year. And then finally, if you're not exhausted by now, we can stay and talk more. I can answer any questions you have, but I know you're probably all anxious to go out and grab some lunch. So I'm going to turn it over for one more time to answer any questions that you have, and then we'll get it wrapped up. Any questions?
Nope, not for me.
Okay, well, I appreciate you all joining this webinar. Like I said, we'll have the recording available. We'll put it on, I think our website might be the best way to get it posted. I don't know if we can send it out electronically. It might be too large. But then I'll also have a PDF version of the PowerPoint available. I look forward to hearing from you all on your project design or any questions that you have as you're looking at your renewals and how they might best be applied for moving forward. So I wish you all best of luck in the competition. Hope to see some new projects coming out, especially with our bonus opportunities. So thanks so much and have a great weekend.
Thanks,